Good morning. Thank you for joining us for this session of best practices for updating GP when your business changes. Deb Schaefer is our presenter today. She is our Director of Project Management and Senior Solution Consultant. And this is the same session that she actually presented at the GPUG Summit in October, and very well attended and great reviews. So we thought we would bring it back to Fargo and share it with our customers as well, so you get that information from us. And with that, for any questions that you have, Sabrina is watching the chat window. There's a little icon at your lower left. Just go ahead and click on that. It'll open up for you to type in your questions, and then at the end, Sabrina's going to go ahead and open it up for a Q&A. With that, we'll go ahead with Deb.
Okay. Thanks, Carolyn.
You're welcome.
So good morning, and we're going to get started this morning. The things that we are going to look at are what happens when your business changes and you need GP to change along with you. So three main things that we're going to look at this morning are changing your chart of accounts, so what to look for, how to make those changes, and then looking at using interfund and intercompany, and we'll go into how those work, and then we'll also look at analytical accounting, the benefits of using that, and some of the setup for that. So the first thing that we're going to look at is how to change your chart of accounts, and I'll do demos in between each of these sessions as well. And like Carolyn said, if you have any questions, you can key them into the chat window, and Sabrina can pass those along. So the first thing that you want to do is you want to look at that account format setup window. And to get to that, you're going to go to Administration, Setup, Company, and Account Format. And what you want to look at there is what your maximum account length and maximum segments are set at, as well as what the current account length and segments are set at. So in this case, the screenshot shows I have a maximum account length of 45, which means that's the number of characters I can have in my account number. That's the biggest that I can make that. And the maximum segments I can go to within this install or instance is 5 segments. So currently, my account length is 9, and it's made up of 3 segments. And you see that breakdown below where my 3 segments are division, account, and department. And my max length for each one of those segments would be 9. And the length that I have those defined at right now is 3, 4, and 2. So you can't enlarge your chart of accounts anymore if you're already at your maximum account length and account segment. In that case, what you would want to do is potentially do a new instance of GP and do that base setup at a larger breakdown and move your databases over. So there are ways around that if your maximum is set too small at this point and doesn't have any room for expansion. Always where to start with this, whether it's changing your chart of accounts or working with Interfund or working with analytical accounting, you want to do everything in a test environment first and just make sure that you have the settings done the way that you need to have them done, as well as you're not messing with your live production, so your business isn't shut down when you're trying to work on this and work out what all the changes are that are needed. And as always, for anybody that knows me, I always back up, back up, back up. Just make sure you're getting those backups done so that you have them. If something goes wrong, you need to be able to go back and not have to start everything from scratch. When you're changing your chart of accounts, you're going to be also utilizing SmartList to create an updated chart to pull the information existing from GP as well as the changes that you're going to need if you expand that chart of accounts. And we're going to walk through these as well. And then we're going to be using Excel, because when you make a change to your chart of accounts and expand that, we also will use Excel and then the Professional Service Tools library to move the account information over from the old account format to the new account format. So for our demo, and you should see my screen now in GP. So the first thing that we want to look at is we're going to go in and we're going to look at that account format. So in this case, my account maximum length was 45, my segments is 5. The maximum that you can set GP up with when you start a new instance, which it is a complete new instance. You can't just go and create another test company. You have to have a separate instance in order to set this up with a larger chart of accounts. The maximum account length that you can do within GP is 66 characters and 10 segments. We typically, when we do a new implementation, will default as a 5x5, meaning you have up to 5 segments with 5 characters in each segment, so you'd have a 25-character account. So in this case, the first thing that you're going to do when you do your chart of accounts here is you're going to first update the top of your account where you're saying what your length is going to be. So in this case, if I want to add another segment, maybe I want to define out companies. So I'm going to change my account length to 11 because I want to add a 4th segment that has 2 characters in it. And then my segments now is going to be 4. By doing that, it's going to add this 4th row. I can change the name on this, which I disconnected my keyboard, so. And then I want this to be 2 characters. Now, typically, if you were going to add a company, you'd probably put that on the front. And there are ways to do that where you can shift things down and make that first section your company. But in just respect for time that we have to do this webinar, I'm going to just do a very simple change here. So once you have this done and you click on OK, that's going to go through, and when you look at your accounts now, and actually I am just going to run the Smart List of accounts. So we're going to go into Smart List, and we're going to go into Financial and Accounts and our basic chart of accounts. So now you can see that I have a dash here, and it's got those spaces for the company that I added. And so now what we need to do is we need to go in and get the actual account number on this rather than just the spaces. So the first thing that you want to do, and I do find it easiest to add the columns for your account numbers. You could take the Smart List as it is and tear it apart and then put it back together. But it is just as easy to go in and add your fields that you have. So I'm just going to add my division, account, and company. So I've got my account. And you can, within this Smart List, use the Control key to add multiple fields at a time. And that's actually department. I'm going to add those 3. Those are going to add in the order that they are in that list for the add, which is alphabetical. But now you can rearrange this based on the order that you have it. And so now I've got my 3 fields here. My company column, actually, let's just go ahead and add that one too. So here's that company column that I just added, and we'll leave that at the end. So now I have my field here. I want to just save this out to Excel, so I'm going to export it to Excel. That's going to throw everything into my fields. And so I can then define what I want this field to be. So we're just going to, for the sake of making it easy here, we're just going to copy this down. It's all going to be company 10. Now, if you had multiple companies, you could, if you were going to move all of these accounts, just add and copy and change to add the additional companies that you wanted to add. So you may have a 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. Maybe you don't need all the accounts for that, but if you do, now you've got an easy way to do that. Now then the next thing that we need to do is we need to put this account number back together. So you can do it this way where you've added the company here. You can also take what we've got existing here to add that back in. So I'm going to concatenate this. And we're just going to choose this, and I want to actually concatenate back together A2, and then it's a comma, because I have my dash at the end of my account number, then I can just add H2, which is my company number. And so now I've got my account number back together. I'm just going to copy this field back down. And so now what I want to do is, with this added, and I usually work on a couple of different worksheets just so that if I make a mistake, then I have a backup. So I'm going to copy this on. And then once I've got that done, you have to, because it's concatenated, it's a formula, you can't just use that in your text file. You have to do a copy and then paste special so that you get the actual value there rather than the formula. So I've done a paste special, and now what I want to do is I'm going to actually take everything else out because I need to make a text file in order to use the professional service tools. So I'm going to delete this. I'm going to actually delete my row A. And now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to highlight my 2 rows. And then I'm going to save this as a text file that is TabDelimited. And I'm going to save that to my desktop. I'm going to call it just COA change. And then again, it needs to be saved as a TabDelimited. Save, and you will get a message when you do that, that when you save it as a TabDelimited, it doesn't support multiple worksheets, and that's fine. So you can just click on OK, and then you can close the window, and it'll ask you to save again, and you can replace it. You haven't made any changes, so it's no different. So then, now you're going to go into the Professional Service Tools library. You're going to do the account modifier and combiner. And this is where you have to have this text file. So we're going to do an import, and we're going to validate. And what this is going to do, first of all, is ask you for your file, and that's my COA change file. And if there's any invalid accounts, so if you've done them already, if you have to do, depending on the amount of data you have, you may need to break this file up into smaller sections. So maybe you just need to do one section at a time as far as within your chart of accounts. If there's anything listed in the invalid accounts, you have to take that out of your text file. So I'm going to just close, and, sorry, I need to modify. Account number in the from and the to. I didn't have the same account number in the from and the to. Okay, so then the next thing that we're going to do is you have to reconcile your years. And you always want to, when you're reconciling your years, go from the oldest year to the newest year. So just under utilities in financial and reconcile, and you're going to choose year. You always start with history, and you start with the oldest year out, and then reconcile. And you'll get this message about detailed transactions. If they don't exist, then the summary balance will be 0. So it's just saying if you don't have the transactions there, it'll either 0 them out or it just re-adds everything together. So you're going to say yes that you want to continue. And we go on to the next year, and the next year. And then do our open years. And just 2 more here. Okay, and once that's done, now we should, if we go into our account and we look at our account numbers, it didn't add it. And that's, I don't know what's wrong with my text file, but essentially what you would see here is that you would have a 10 in that account number. I know my text file is correct. I'll have to look at that. And once that account number is in there, then you're set to go. So that's the overall process, the very short, quick version of doing an account change.
Deb, can I?
Sure.
Professional services tools library,
Yes.
where you got that account changer.
Mm-hmm.
That used, for those that have used GP for a number of years, that used to be something you would have to pay for, but now Microsoft includes that with your GP. However, I believe they still have to request it from the partner. Is that correct, Deb?
Yes, we can help them with that install.
So you're not going to find that in your system. And I kind of recommend anyways that if somebody's going to go through this big of a process in their system that they connect and get a little guidance. Is that
Yep,
how you feel?
absolutely.
Too? Okay. So through that process of talking with Deb, you're going to find out anyways how to get those crystal tools.
Yep, and actually they've moved a couple of these actually out of professional service tools and just stuck them right in the utilities area.
Oh, good.
So, for example, if you're going to combine your vendors, you can do that right now just through utilities. You don't have to go through professional service tools for that.
So that's going to depend on what version of GP you have. Okay.
Yep.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So the next thing that we're going to take a look at is interfund and intercompany. So I'm going to switch over to another GP company where I have Interfund Setup. And so what Interfund actually allows you to do is, I guess I like to think of it in the example that Interfund is, I'll gladly pay you Tuesday for a payables check today. What Interfund does is Interfund allows you to have, say, one main checkbook. And if your business works a lot with different funds, you may not want to have a checkbook for each individual fund. So you would end up having, a handful or more, depending on what your business is, of checkbooks that you would need to write checks with. And that gets a little confusing sometimes because you have to remember when you're going to go in and do payables checks that you've got the right checkbook selected and you're only pulling the checks when you do that select checks run for that particular fund. So there's a lot of breakdowns that you need to do if you're going to do those individually. In the case that you maybe just put your funds into, say, savings type accounts and you can just do bank transfers between them, Interfund allows you then to just do one full check run, and the system will keep track of all your due to, due froms between those departments. So the first thing that we're going to look at is the Interfund setup itself. And within Interfund management, so we're in financial setup and then financial again, and then looking at Interfund management. In this window, you have two different options. You can do either a single due to, due from or the clearing fund central treasury. Now the single due to, due from just creates one single due to, due from account. And in that case, then you'll get both sides of your transactions in that fund, which that's fine. If you don't have a lot of them that you need to keep track of, maybe that's an easy way to go. The clearing fund central treasury way is how I've got it set up here, and this requires both a due to and due from account so that you're going to see that breakdown. And it does, if you have a lot of funds, it's much easier to go in and reconcile these because each one is based on the individual department or division or however you're splitting that up on your segments. So in this case, I've got my due to, due from set up. I'm defining which segment that I'm going to do my breakdown on. So I'm going to do my first segment here, and that's going to be my different divisions. And you don't, for your base division, you're not going to set anything up for that. You're only setting up for those other divisions that you have set up within your chart of accounts. The one thing that you do want to remember is if you're using Interfund, if, let's say, you add another department here, if I added 700, you need to make sure that you fill in the accounts for those, because if you enter transactions for that new division in this case, and you don't have the due to, due from set up, the system doesn't keep track of that for you. That's totally on the users to remember that if you add a division, you need to go in and add the Interfund accounts for you, because it won't do it automatically. So once you have this set up, and you'll get a message here to make sure that the fund segments in any multi-currency rounding accounts match that clearing fund number, which I don't think anybody is really using multi-currency at this point, so you don't have to worry about that part of it. Then we're going to go in, and I'm just going to do a payables transaction just to walk through so that you can see how Interfund functions. So we're just going to do a basic transaction, and we'll just call it Test Interfund. And I'm going to choose a vendor and put my document number in. And we'll do it for $125. And so at this point, when you look at your distributions, what I want to make sure is that, first of all, I've got an account that will be a good example, but it's going to a different division here. So everything's good here. You're not going to see a difference in the subledger because Interfund and these transactions don't affect your subledger. You're looking purely at your general ledger for this. I'm going to click on OK here, and we're going to go ahead and just post this transaction. And as soon as that posts, then we're going to close out, and I'm going to show you the posting journal here, and we're not going to worry about the other entries here. And I'll bring up the AA posting journal as well. So initially, you've got your payables transaction posting journal. It's our $125, and here's the two accounts that are on my distributions, and this is absolutely correct. In the payables transactions, you're not going to see the changes to include the due to and due froms. So we've got those two, and then we've got the analytical accounting transaction here so that you can see that. And we're going to come back to the analytical conversation in just a little bit. So now we're going to go into financial, and we're going to go into transactions. And we're going to bring up our batch because I have my batch stopping in the GL so that you can see the edit list. And this is my PMTRX batch. And I know that because I just posted that payables transaction, so it's payables management transaction. And I'm going to just print the edit list. And I have a couple of other transactions in there, so you'll see those also. Okay, so I have a couple other transactions in here, and they also have the due to due from. So you can see now in that general ledger edit list that the due to due from transactions are made with those accounts that are set up in Interfund management to move the dollars as they need to. So each one of these is moving. And I'll just scroll down. Here's our last transaction. So we've got our $125, and this was my 10/61/30, and then my due to and due from transactions created with that. So now you can go in and you can create an MR report based just on those due to due froms to help you with the reconciling for that. But again, by doing two accounts here, this makes it a lot easier to do the reconciling, and it depends, of course, on the number of funds that you have to how you want to handle that. So if you're using Interfund, you can use one central operating account and then just do bank transactions to move funds between the fund account and your operating account. All right. The next section that we're going to go through is analytical accounting. So I'm just going to close this report out. And I'm going to close out these as well. So the first things that you need to use if you're going to do analytical accounting, and a little background on analytical accounting. So analytical accounting allows you to track additional breakdown information in your GL without expanding your GL. So as an example, if you, say, have a vehicles account, and I've got one set up here as an example. So if you're tracking vehicles and you have one central vehicles account within your chart of accounts, maybe you want to track the expenses that go towards multiple vehicles that you have being totaled in the single vehicles account. I don't know if that made sense. So we'll try that again. So you have a vehicles account 000641000, and that's your vehicles expense account. But maybe you have 5 different vehicles, and all of the costs for those 5 vehicles are going into the one vehicle account. Analytical accounting will allow you to split out those 5 vehicles so that you can track and you can report on the individual costs of maintenance and gas and anything else that you're doing to those vehicles, licensing, and see the breakdown by vehicle, but still not enlarge the chart of accounts. You still would just keep the single vehicles expense account within your chart. So we'll walk through that. The first thing that you need to do with analytical accounting is you really want to plan out, first of all, what you want to report on and break out before you go in and you start setting this up. So in analytical accounting, so we went to administration, setup, and then below system, company, and then analytical accounting. The first thing that you're going to do here is go into setup. And I've already run this on mine, but you would be able to create the default record here and then activate analytical accounting. When you do that, the system's going to run through and it's going to get all the analytical accounting information set up and ready to go so that you can go in and start doing your setups. So then the next thing that you're going to do, and I'm just going to exit that because I already have my setup done, is we're going to go into the options. And within the options here, this is where we're going to look at how do we want analytical accounting to function. So do you want to post through the general ledger for transaction posting? Initially, I would say to leave this unchecked so that you can do like I did with the Payables Transaction, where you can go into the GL and you can verify that you've got everything going to the right place before that posts through, because otherwise you end up having to back transactions out to make corrections. So just until you know you've got it set up correctly, then I would leave that unchecked. Allowing the deletion of transaction dimensions. Again, what's your policy going to be once you get this set up? Do you allow people to go in and delete dimensions if they're not needed? Then the next two are showing inactive transaction dimensions. So maybe you've got a setup done and now you don't need to use it anymore and you're going to inactivate it. Do you want those to be able to be seen in the lookups? And then do you want to allow transaction dimension and payroll? That varies by scenario and what people need to have happen. Some people don't use analytical with payroll. Some may want to just to give them additional breakdown. Then the special characters and dimension codes. I have that checked on just because if I'm quickly trying to key something in, I may hit a special code. In most cases, I would say no, though. You probably would not want to have special codes set up because nowhere else in GP do we recommend using special codes. So whether it's in inventory items or vendor names or vendor IDs, any ID field, really, you don't want to have special characters in. And then showing valid code combination when you're looking at transactions and budgets, and you can do things with budgeting and encumbrances within analytical as well, including the dimensions in the year-end close. And if you're working with analytical, we can definitely go into that further. Do you want to use analytical when you're working with fixed assets? So that's just where you can go in and, again, do analytical accounting transactions off of your fixed assets. And then do you want to include the required transaction dimension within purchase requisitions? The next area that you want to go through within the analytical accounting options is to make sure you do that smart list integration. And what that does is that goes through and that adds all of these smart lists for you for analytical accounting. And that way, when you go into smart lists, then you'll have in your smart list that section for analytical accounting, and you have all these reports created already. And I think I have mine done. So then you can go in and you can see the different transactions that are out there for that have been done using analytical accounting. So once you have that done, then you're going to go in and you're going to do the assignment, and that is where all do you want to use analytical accounting. So I have everything marked in this case, but again, we can define whether or not you want to use it in everything. Maybe you don't want it in fixed assets, you don't want it in payroll, and you don't want it in bank rec. You may just want to have purchasing or payables and the GL. The last section within the administration side is user access. And the main thing here with user access is that if you don't assign a user to the transaction dimension, which is the grouping that you're using, and the individual code within that dimension, your users won't be able to enter in AA information on these transactions. They'll get your users don't have access. This is a separate access for these different dimensions than your security. So in this case, if we look at my vehicle insurance transaction dimension, I have two different vehicles set up here. I have an F-150 and a Jeep Cherokee. And in each one of those, I have to make sure that my users have access to those, or they can enter transactions and assign analytical accounting transactions to those individual dimension codes. So there is some setup with using analytical accounting, but it is very helpful once you have that done. Okay, so once you've granted your access, then your users can go in and enter in transactions to those individual accounts. So what we're going to do is there's a fair amount of setup behind it. We have to set up the things like the projects and the account access. And those are all done under cards and financial. So here's where we're setting up our individual dimensions. So I'm going to bring up my vehicle insurance. And so from this window, that's all you're doing. You're defining what the dimension is, whether or not you want to create new codes on the fly, the different ways that you want to track the account information. Then you're going to define your different codes. So again, this is where I set up my two vehicles. You could set up all your vehicles if you wanted to track those here. Once you've done that, then you're going to create an accounting class for these. So we'll look at our vehicle insurance here. And it is going to pull all the different transaction dimensions within this, but you want to make sure that you just choose the ones that are applicable to that class ID. So in this case, I'm using the vehicle insurance. And then I'm going into the accounts and I'm defining which accounts do I want to have linked. So you can do either by account number or by description or accounting class, however you want to see those. And then I know that my account number for my vehicle in this case is 6410. And I've already got it linked here. So you would do that through each one of any accounts that you wanted to link back to this. Now in this case, we're just using the one vehicle insurance account and then having multiple vehicles drill back to that. So once you have that set up, then we're going to close out of here and I'm going to go into transactions, and I'm just going to enter a transaction in this case. And this is going to be my vehicle insurance. And we'll say it's $100. So because I have this account selected, it's automatically going to open the analytical accounting window for me. And I can then define where this $100 is going. Maybe it's going specifically just on that F-150, so I can assign that here. I can validate just to make sure that I made a correct entry. You can break this up by percentages. So if I did a 50-50, I could do half of this on the F-150 or half on the Jeep. Once that's done, I'm just going to save it, and then I would finish out my transaction. So we'll just say it's cash in this case. Or not that account, rather. It's inactive. So then once that's done, then I can also see on my posting account, or rather my posting reports, so this is my regular posting journal, just showing me my vehicle insurance and the amount. And then I'll also get the AA posting journal that'll show me which vehicle this went against. So if it was split, then I'd have multiple lines there for each of the amounts for the vehicles. All right. So the quick version of changing your chart of accounts using Interfund, intercompany works similar, where you can not only work like Interfund within one GP company, but intercompany will allow you to actually cross companies with your due to froms, and looking at analytical accounting. Do you have any questions, Sabrina?
No, but I'll unmute everyone here.
Okay.
All right, I have everyone unmuted, so if you have any questions, feel free to ask them at this time.
I think a couple of questions that I had from when I presented this at the GPUG Summit. Key things there were really doing the test environment, and that's one thing that maybe isn't clear is, so when you have your SQL installed, when you do a test company, you're using that same SQL instance. In order to change your account format, we would do a completely new SQL instance, so it would be a totally separate environment from your existing production environment in order to increase that default and maximum number of accounts, and or rather characters and segments within your chart of accounts. So that's one thing to keep in mind, which those are very easy to do. You can, in most cases, just spin up a new instance to do that SQL install and then a new GP install, and then you would just move everything over. Other questions on that are really just making sure that you do this in a test environment. Something to keep in mind is the amount of data that you have. So when you do a test environment, you'll be able to get a good idea of how long the account conversion is going to take when you're moving all the history from the old account number to the new account number. So in the case, on that one didn't close. So in the case that I've changed my chart of accounts here, and I know my company is not on there, but when you're looking at your account and you have that new account number, when you go into the summary area for those transactions, all of those transactions have to be updated. So if you have a lot of history, it's going to take it could take a fairly long time to do that conversion, to add either the new segment on it. There are ways that we can decrease segments if that's something that you're looking to do. But it's definitely something that you want to plan out and do in a test environment first so that you know how long your system's going to be down. I've done some of these where it's taken an hour or two to do the conversion, and I've done some where it's taken multiple hours to do, pushing 20 hours to get things done just because of the amount of the data. So.
Deb, is there ever a situation where the pistol tools that are with GP won't handle the account changer?
No. No. Professional service tools would always be what we used to do that part of it. Now, if they have something else already, if they have like the Corporate Renaissance Group changer, then things can be done a little bit differently that way. But if you don't have that add-on, which is, if I remember right, kind of expensive, then pistol tools is the way to go. on this.
We have options if we need them,
Mm-hmm.
if it's not what GP can do. There are ISVs. All right. Doesn't look like we have any questions coming in. Stop me right now if there is. Don't hear anybody. All right. Well, thank you all for joining us. And keep watching the newsletters or check our website. We have more of these sessions coming up quite frequently. They are scheduled, I think, at least once a month or so. It just depends on. Some of them are done by the consultants like today, and some of them are done by the ISV or a guest. So keep watching and give us feedback on how you like the session, what you feel could make it better. Maybe you want to give us an idea of something that you want us to present during these webinars. We'd love to have your feedback. So with that, I think we will go ahead and end our session. Thank you for joining us.